Imagine that you get a prepaid debit card and you load some money on the card. Perhaps you even get your paycheck direct deposited to the card. And then you go to use it and you realize all the money's gone. Someone's hacked your account or stolen your card or your number, and they've taken all your money. Are you out of luck? Can you get your money back? My name is Rob Berger. I'm the founder of DoughRoller.net and the host of this podcast. And in this episode, I interview the CEO of Green Dot, and he provides us insight into how to avoid fraud and what happens if someone does take your money.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. Have, as I mentioned at the top of the show, an interview today that really covers a very important topic. And I'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, I wanted to mention that I started just a couple of shows ago. I set up a page for folks to support the show if you want to. And it really was triggered from a number of emails that I've received from listeners over the last 6 months, particularly since, and now this has been, I think, a year ago, I stopped advertisements. I don't run any ads on the show. And they kept emailing me. I got a number of emails from folks saying, hey, how can I support the show? And I really didn't do anything about it, but recently put up a page, DoughRoller.net/support. And it's a way, if you'd like to financially support the show, and I'm grateful for those that have already chosen to do so. One thing I thought, though, is I want to start giving back. I don't want to just receive support. I want to take what support I get and sort of reinvest it back in the show. And I have a number of ideas, not all of which I'm going to mention today. But one sort of initial idea, if I can get to the support level of a total of just $500 a month, if it rises to that level, the first thing I'm going to do is, and this is in response to a number of emails, I'm going to invest the money to get different music and intro soundtrack for this show, because I've had a number of folks say, it's kind of jarring. And as I listen to it now, this is, we're getting close to this 200th episode. Yeah, it doesn't really fit my style. I like it. The person who put it together for me did a phenomenal job, but it really doesn't fit the style and tone of this show. So I'm not sure what I will replace it with. But my promise to you is if I can get to $500 in monthly support, that's the first thing I'm going to do is change the intro music. And so again, you can support the show if you'd like, DoughRoller.net/support. Okay, today's show was triggered actually from a number of email from folks who have a concern that I suspect all of us share. It's certainly one that I have, and that is with more and more of our finances online, how safe are we? What happens if someone hacks into our brokerage account and takes our money? What happens if someone hacks into our bank account and takes our money or our credit card? And, the list goes on. So initially I thought, well, I'll just do all of this research for all of these types of accounts that we might have and come up with some, massive podcast where I walk through the law on all the different types of accounts. But I thought that's not really what people want. We need something a little more down to earth. So instead I thought, why don't I reach out to folks who are experts in this area? And it'll be different folks for different kinds of financial institutions. Well, today I have on the show Steve Streit, who is the founder and CEO of Green Dot. Now, you may know of Green Dot as a prepaid debit card company, and that's certainly true, but it's also a bank, which you may not realize. So in some ways, we're kind of killing two birds with one stone today, talking about both prepaid debit cards and banking. And as you'll hear in the interview, and I think Steve did a great job of sort of explaining not just the industry rules and regulations on this issue, but also statutes that are pending that he thinks will pass or may pass soon, as well as additional protections that Green Dot offers, and kind of where he thinks this space is going in the future, and then also some sort of practical tips on how to protect yourself. And I think even if you don't have a prepaid card, a lot of what Steve covers in this interview will help you and certainly help me for, frankly, all of my accounts that are online. So with that, let's turn to the interview. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. How are you?
I am doing well, and I'm so grateful for your time. I imagine being the CEO of Green Dot probably keeps you fairly busy.
It has its moments, but never too busy to participate in great shows like yours, and so I'm honored to be invited.
Well, I appreciate that, and I was reading a bit about you. So am I correct that you're one of the founders of Green Dot?
It is. I'm the founder of the company and chairman and CEO, and occasionally still sweep the floors and do dishes. So I do it all.
Right.
No, we've become a large company, but and it's a 15-year-old company. But it is true that I'm the founder, and the company actually started at a little table in my bedroom at a home in San Marino, California, near Pasadena. And so, that's how the company started 15 years ago. It was literally an idea that started in my house.
I love those kind of stories. And I'm curious, though, what prompted you to think this is the kind of company you should start? What happened 15 years ago?
Well, it's never quite that clean, I guess, in hindsight. But what was interesting in those days was the Internet was something that was, around, but everyone had dial-up modems, right? So you'd dial up and you'd go get a cup of coffee, get the newspaper, and when you came back, if you're lucky, the modem connected and you can read an email.
Right.
But it was 1999. But everyone knew that high speed would come one day, but really it was not at all around except for certain college campuses back then. But there was a common belief that, hey, one day people will be able to get online more quickly. One day online will always be on, and you can access it at any time and not dial up. And when that happens, commerce will pick up. And when commerce picks up, people will need to pay for things, and credit cards will likely be the dominant way people will pay for things. And, all that came true, obviously. But what do you do for young people? Like if you don't, if you're 18 or 17 or in college, you don't have a credit card and you want to buy a product online, how will you do that if you don't have a credit card? And that conversation and that discussion that I had with a buddy of mine who worked for Hollywood Records, Disney Records, same company, got my brain thinking about, hey, this could be something cool to develop a credit card for kids. And that was the original idea of what we started on. And so I was working on a lot of things. In those days, I was in the broadcasting industry, not banking. And I started thinking about, how would that work and what would it mean? And before long, we came up with a product called iGen, which stood for the Internet Generation, the iGen MasterCard. And it was designed for kids who, on college campuses, who would have high-speed internet one day but couldn't buy something. But what we found is that when we launched the product in 98 Rite Aid pharmacy stores in the Washington, D.C. metro area, that's where we started in a pilot. And when we launched them, kids were not buying the product at all. And so when we did our research as to who was buying the product, it was actually low-income Americans who were buying it so that they could have a credit card, if you will, or a debit card to use for electronic purchases and for, buying things online or paying bills over the phone or all the things you and I do with our credit cards. And so we realized that we had a right product, but the wrong target. It wasn't kids at all who would find the product attractive. It became clear to us in the early days that it was people who otherwise could not qualify for a checking account or couldn't get a credit card, which is good. It made the market much bigger, but we had to retool the company, pull off all the packaging, and relaunch with a more, more mass appeal message for a different kind of consumer. And that's what we did. And that's where we became the company we are today in those early days. But originally it started out as a card for kids in dorm rooms who wanted to buy things online.
I wonder if it's starting to come full circle a bit in the sense that, at least it seems to me over the last few years, the prepaid debit card market has started to go more mainstream. I wonder if you're sort of circling back and now getting those teenagers and young adults and other folks who are not underbanked or unbanked to use the product.
We are. I mean, no, I think it's a very a smart point. As you look at our customer base, it's true that half do not have any other kind of bank account. And so in that regard, the roots of the company or the roots of the product are still very present. But the other half are not who we started with. The other half of our customers today have credit cards. They have a checking account at a traditional bank. They have a savings account perhaps. But they find prepaid useful for them for other reasons. Maybe they view it as less risky because they don't want to use their checking account number online, and this debit card gives them some separation of funds. A lot of people who have bank accounts use our products for budgeting, meaning they'll say, okay, I'm going to put let's pretend $500 on my Green Dot card. And then this way, when I spend it and I'm done, and I won't accidentally spend, my rent money that's in my regular checking account. So, people find different uses for it. But you're right, it's become more mainstream, more broad-based, and the customer base increasingly year over year looks more mainstream.
Yeah. Okay, well, the reason I'd asked you on the show, as you know, is I've had a number of listeners email me different kinds of questions, but all related to concern about their money online, whether it's an investment account, a bank account, or in this case, a prepaid debit card. They're concerned if I put my money on a prepaid debit card and either my account gets hacked or my number gets stolen, and someone uses my card, it might, let's say they spend, as you said, $500. My $500 fund money for the month is gone.
Yeah.
What is their recourse? Do they get their money back, or are they out of luck?
So Green Dot's unique in a good way, and we really pride ourselves on wearing the white hat in banking, if you will. And for years and years and years, long before the CFPB and other organizations, we were pro-consumer before being pro-consumer was cool, if you will. And so we've always had great protections for our customers, but even more so because in our case, because in 2011, we became a bank holding company regulated by the Federal Reserve Board of Governors and the State of Utah Department of Financial Institutions, meaning that today a Green Dot prepaid card is identical in terms of its consumer protections as any checking account from any regulated bank. And so the answer is if you have a Green Dot brand or a Walmart Money Card brand, which is our product as well, prepaid Visa or MasterCard, your protections and rights are identical as if you had a checking account from any bank. And that is that you would notify us that your funds were lost or stolen. We would block the account to make sure no further damage happened. You would tell us how much money you lost and why. And then we would research that and give you that money back on your card as a provisional credit if we couldn't determine the facts fast enough. Or if we could determine the facts fast enough, we just give it back to you right then, which happens typically. So in our case, so you're well protected. It is fair to say that not all prepaid cards have that. We're the only bank, if you will, that is a prepaid company as our core product, and that makes us a little unique. But it is true that, not every card is the same way. And as you know, Rob, you've seen a lot of articles over the years about our prepaid card safe and, our checking account safer. And the answer is it depends on the brand. If you have a Green Dot card, you're in great shape. If you have a competitor's card, maybe you're maybe not in great shape. But the CFPB, as part of their new rulemaking, has proposed in the new rules that prepaid cards, all of them, would need to carry the same what's called Reg E is the name of the law, but the same Reg E protections as any other kind of bank account to make sure that consumers have the same protections that they can enjoy from other kinds of bank accounts. So ultimately, we think that will become the law of the land. But today, it's something that Green Dot has, but not all do.
Okay. Well, so for money that I would put on a Green Dot card, is that money FDIC insured?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Green Dot's a bank, and your prepaid card is an FDIC-insured bank account, just like any others. And so you have the FDIC insurance for the solvency of the bank, if you will. That's what that protects you against. You'd have the Reg E protections, which is what I just described, for error and dispute resolution, and a regulated way of handling that for customers. And then you have all the other protections that banks afford their customers in terms of chargeback rights and dispute rights and all the goodies that you get when you use any kind of a bank. So the answer is that's right.
So just so folks we're all on the same page, you said a chargeback right. What is that?
Well, chargeback right is similar. It all falls under this Reg E. But you could have a Reg E dispute, as it's called in the industry, for a couple of reasons. One is that you saw your card got lost or stolen, and you say, oh gosh, I left it at a restaurant, I forgot to take it, and now my card's lost, and I noticed that there's been 20 transactions that I didn't make, and you need that money back. So that's one kind. But another kind may just be a dispute that, hey, I thought that this product was supposed to be called X. I ordered this from an online website, but the charge was more than that, or they charged me twice or charged me 3 times. So it isn't that it's fraudulent necessarily. It's just that it isn't in keeping with what you thought your deal was, and you have the right to say, hey, listen, I want this charged back to the merchant. I didn't do this. And typically that's handled between the customer and the merchant, but oftentimes the bank is brought into that loop as well. So there's all kinds of ways that customers can lose money on bank products, and that's why having those kinds of consumer protections are so important for customers.
Right. So I know with credit cards, there's a federal law that says if your card is used, in fraudulent transactions, you're not liable for any more than $50 of the charge. Now I know I think at least the big issuers, maybe all credit cards today, tend to cover even that $50 for consumers, but the federal law, is you're not liable for more than $50. Is there any sort of similar federal law as it relates to either, I guess, prepaid debit cards?
Yeah. Well, not today, but if the CFPB rules go through as written, there will be.
Okay.
But yeah, the same. That's right. It's the same law. There are some slight variations between a credit card versus a deposit account, like a checking account. But ultimately, you're right that if the law is written and passed the way it's written, that'll be a rule for all prepaid cards as well. And the industry, some support it, some don't. Green Dot supports that wholeheartedly. We do it today, even though it isn't the law. And we've done that for many, many years, even though it was never in the law or even proposed to be in the law. And nobody likes to hear a CEO brag about their company, but I am proud of our company because our employees are good people and we always intend to do the right thing for customers. And we think that we do that because it's right, but we also do it because it's a great competitive advantage. If you're a customer and you know that Green Dot has your back and that we're a fair company to deal with, we think it's likely to give us more customers and a bigger market share. So we do it because it's the right thing to do, but we also do it because we think it's good for business. And so, but not everybody does. But as I mentioned, over time, we do think everybody will because the CFPB will make sure that becomes a law. And so we've been a big proponent of that, but it's expensive. And so if you were to ask, and I think it's kind of part of your question is, well, why wouldn't everybody do that? And the answer is it's expensive to do. If you think of a mass compromise like the Target data breach, which happened, about a year and a half ago, I guess now.
Right.
And you think of all the customers who were impacted by that, all the debit card numbers that were taken, all the checking account numbers that were taken, all the routing numbers that were taken. Just think of all the data that was contained, or the Anthem Blue Cross data breach that happened recently. Yep. Well, those things generate a lot of losses, and we're a big bank, and so when you have customers. You can have, hundreds of thousands of customers who lost money because their credit card details or their debit card details were compromised and money was taken. And so it's expensive to have that kind of protection and to offer it. And that's why not everybody in the industry loves the idea. But as I mentioned earlier, it's the right thing to do for customers. And the CFPB, I think, is going to ensure that it becomes law for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, from your vantage point, do you see that there are certain types of fraud that are sort of more common, and perhaps are there ways that consumers who use a Green Dot or even other prepaid cards, steps they can take to protect themselves?
Well, I think the steps to self-protect, if you will, are the same whether you have a credit card, a checking account, a prepaid card, or your login credentials for anything, a brokerage account, and that is have good passwords for online, your online support. In other words, don't just use the word password.
Right.
So it's always so funny that, I have a great password. What's that? Well, nobody will ever guess it. I just say password, Well, the thieves are onto that, and there's all kinds of bots. But there's a lot of ways to have really strong passwords. In Green Dot's case, we actually coach the customer and say, hey, that's kind of weak. Why don't you pick a stronger one? But number one, have a good password. Number two, keep your card with you and make sure you know where it is. Don't give people your PIN number. You'll be shocked. You would be shocked, I think, how many people will give away their PIN number. And they'll say, well, somebody went to an ATM and took money. So how did that happen? Well, I write my PIN number on the back of the card so I don't forget it. Well, that's not great. So I think, but it's fairly common to hear things like that, and crooks know that too. So I think part of self-protection is just using a good dose of common sense about keeping your details private and not with the card, and knowing who you're giving your account number to. I can tell you, Rob, here's another one that we're learning about. And again, this is about not Green Dot per se, it's about any bank, any debit card, but your listeners may find it interesting. there's a scam that's fairly widespread. I mean, I'm hearing about it a lot. And at my level, if I hear about it, that means it's really happening. Remember, Green Dot has a lot of employees and a lot of different people in our risk and fraud department. So by the time something would hit my desk, that means it's happened enough where they want me to know about it. And so I don't know about every scam, but this one I thought was interesting, where somebody will call you up from a call center. They sound very legitimate, right? And they say, we notice here that you're a DirecTV customer or you're a Time Warner customer or whatever it is. And they know by neighborhood what customer you likely are. So if I knew where you lived, I would likely know what cable service you have. Maybe it's Charter, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, based on your address.
Right.
And I call you up and say, hey, Rob, I work for fill in the blank, whatever company it is. And I have a deal for you. If you prepay 1 year of your cable service or your satellite service, I'll give you 2 years for free. And, that's a good deal, you might think. Well, yep, that is. But to do that, I need you to pay me, and we have a deal with fill in the blank bank. And if you put it on that account, then we'll go ahead and give you this incredible discount. But to do that, I need to open an account for you right now. And Rob says, okay. All right, great. Well, give me your name, Rob, and give me your first and last name. Now about how big your social, and you give it to me. How about your date of birth? You give it to me. Okay, great. The bank is going to want to know your mother's maiden name. I'll tell you that too. And it just keeps going. They want to know. There's a security test here. They want to know what college you went to, or what the zip code of your house was back when you lived in Florida. And the customer, the victim, who's convinced that this is a legitimate, promotion, will voluntarily give all of their personal details, including the security information that the bank has put into that enrollment application to prevent from this kind of a thing. Mm. So it's a great question you're asking of what can consumers do to protect themselves. It's common sense, but it's hard to know because, I'll be honest, my wife fell for that scam. And we know a thing, and she goes, we have this really cool thing with DirecTV. And I said, DirecTV? What are they doing? And I said, I said, hey, what did you tell them? Well, I told them this or that. Well, did he give them, your mom's maiden name? Well, yeah. Why? Is that wrong? And I said, oh gosh, and here you go again. So it shows you that, and I think my wife's really, really sharp, and her husband works for a bank. So it goes to show you that these scams are very, very difficult, but it always comes down to buyer beware, good common sense, and making sure that you don't give your personal details out to anybody who you don't personally know and trust. So that's a really good first line of defense, and we try to preach that often. And it's one of the reasons why I'm giving your listeners that story, because these kinds of scams, or scams like it, think of all the different iterations there could be, are fairly common, and they affect all banks and all kinds of accounts. And people need to be cautious not to give away that information.
Right. Yeah. Whenever I get a communication from a credit card company or bank that I have a relationship with, particularly email or whatever, and I'm not certain it's legitimate, but it's close enough that I don't think I should ignore it, I never respond, or even if it's a phone call, I just go to my credit card or my last statement and call the number that I find on the card. So
that's smart.
So I know with credit cards, because they call me every now and again, they monitor the activity and they have alerts that pop up from time to time that suggest that maybe a transaction is fraudulent. And sometimes they'll even put a hold on my credit card until I call them back and tell them no, it's not, or in some cases maybe it is. Do prepaid cards, does Green Dot have a similar kind of system?
We do. Yep. Our company does. But again, we're sort of unique in the industry because we're a big bank, meaning bigger than a small bank. We're not as big as Chase or something like that, obviously. But we're a big enough sized company where we've invested in those types of tools and those types of protections. So the answer is yes, we do. Not all would. Not all banks do. Many small community banks and others don't have the resources for that kind of technology. Mm. But in our case, if you have a Green Dot brand or a Walmart Money Card brand, a prepaid card, the answer is yes. If we notice something unusual, when I say we, it's not a human being, but it's a computer that detects abnormal behavior or abnormal transactional behavior.
Right.
You'll get a text or a phone call that says, we're calling from Green Dot. They know, hey, can you please call 1-800 such and so, and it's up. And then when you call, there's an automated operator that says, when you call, we know that you're calling because of this block. We can see it in the system. And we'll ask you to, hey, did you charge these last 4 transactions? You click 1 for yes, 2 for no. And if you say yes, well, then we unblock the card and you go about your merry way. But it's a simple tool, but hard to develop. Once you have it deployed, though, it really is very effective at stopping that. And the customer may say, no, those transactions are at an Exxon gas station in Pittsburgh, and I was in Los Angeles those days. No, that's not me. And that gives the bank the opportunity to stop it right then and there, issue a new account and a new card. It saves us the money because ultimately the customer is going to call up with there's a phrase again, a regi dispute, right? And we're going to end up paying that customer back. And also it's good for the customer because they've been inconvenienced and they don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of trying to repair their account. So that kind of technology is expensive, but most of the big banks in our country have that. We do as well.
Right. Good. Well, I appreciate your time today. Let me just try to hit you up with a couple more questions if you've got a couple minutes.
Sure.
And the first one is, so where do you see the prepaid card market going in over the next 1 or 2 or 3 years?
Well, look, we like the business a lot, and we think it has an opportunity to be increasingly more mainstream. And when I say mainstream, we're not a niche company. Low and moderate income Americans make up more than half of our country's population and more than half of our households. When you think about households making $50,000 a year or less, that's half the country, half. If you say households, and by the way, household means mom, dad, or a couple of adults maybe living in that home, right? Right. So the entire, among all of them, meaning they have 2 or 3 people working, the family income is $50,000 a year or less. If you look at $75,000 a year or less of household income, it's almost 2/3 of the country's household. So our company serves a niche that really isn't a niche. It's the majority of the country. And knowing that, we've tried to program Green Dot and run it to be increasingly more mainstream, meaning that the services we provide and the features on our card products are more and more indicative of a product that can be used for somebody's full finances. So whether it's online bill pay or being able now to take a picture of a check and deposit it through remote capture deposit, get cash at lots and lots and lots of free ATMs, and do all the things that any of us need to do to sort of transact in the modern world. Those features, which 5 years ago were very rare on a prepaid card, right, today I think are more and more common and increasingly so. And that's been happening because the customer base in America is getting more and more low and moderate income, if you will. The country is getting poorer, not richer. So it's the right demographic group to serve, if you will, from a business proposition. Right. But also because the development of technology in mobile phones, smartphones, which again 5 years ago were relegated mostly to higher income folks and younger people. Today, senior citizens, low-income people, almost everybody has a smartphone, and that has allowed better apps and better kinds of online services to be developed to meet new technologies. So I think the confluence of better technology that's more mass appeal in everybody's hands and the fact that more and more of America is lower income has created the mainstreaming effect of prepaid. And I don't know if I explained that well, but if that makes sense. And so the result of that is we think these products will continue to have features and services that allow consumers to conduct their full banking off those cards. Yeah. And that's certainly the case with our products, and I think we're seeing that with others as well.
Yeah, you mentioned smartphones, and it's funny. I watched my in-laws, my wife's parents, get smartphones, which was kind of it was kind of fun to watch this evolution in their lives, particularly when they sat in the same room and texted each other. But, Apple Pay has been a big deal here, and now the Apple Watch. How do you see Apple Pay influencing this space, and particularly specific to prepaid cards?
Well, so Apple Pay is fascinating, or any kind of online or mobile integration like that, because if you sort of fast forward over many years, the brand on the card and all those things may become less relevant, and your method or channel of payment may become more relevant. And I think Apple Pay is indicative of that. Let me give you an illustration, because that probably doesn't make a lot of sense what you said. But I'll give you an illustration using the broadcasting industry. It's one that maybe your listeners can better relate to. So It used to be that you had three television networks primarily. You had some independent stations, but you had ABC, CBS, and NBC, and whatever shows they had on are the shows you watched, okay? So the networks had a huge gatekeeping function in terms of what kinds of properties or what kinds of shows consumers could watch. And then you had cable, and then more and more people grew up, looking for shows. In other words, if you're watching Saved by the Bell or something, you don't know if you're watching ABC, Fox, TNT, or something else, and you don't really care. You like that show. And so the actual channels became less relevant, and what became more relevant was the intellectual property or the content, right?
Right.
And then you fast forward to today, and somebody says, "Oh, I love Grey's Anatomy." For example, I have a lot of kids, but my youngest is 15, and she loves Grey's Anatomy. But she doesn't care or even know where she's getting that show from. Was she watching it on her computer and downloading it from some site? Was she watching it on an airplane screen that was in the seat as we flew to New York? Was she watching it on her iPhone? And if you asked her, she wouldn't know. If I were to say, "Hey, what network was Grey's Anatomy on?" She'd say, "What's a network?" Right. If I said, "Well, what channel is it on?" She goes, "What do you mean a channel?" Whereas I'm 53. If you were to ask me that when I was in my 20s or in my teens, I would say I watched Happy Days on Channel 10, which is ABC.
I'm right there with you.
Right.
Yep.
So if you take that analogy of media, which maybe your listeners can relate to, the same thing I believe will happen over time with payments. And what I mean by that is that it isn't that I'm using let's pretend a MasterCard issued by Chase and swiping it at this terminal. It's that I have a banking relationship with my bank, and in our case, hopefully it's Green Dot Bank, increasingly so, and thank goodness it's turned out that way. But I have a banking relationship, and that's the bank that holds my money. But the content, the equivalent of Happy Days or the equivalent of Grey's Anatomy, the content is the ability to buy something when you want to buy it. And how you buy it, I think, is going to become really less and less relevant to consumers. So the fact that it's this brand issued on that bank, processed by that transaction processor through that ATM network, whatever it might be, I don't think people are really going to think that much about any more than when you use an ATM machine. Do you really know or care that it was through, the NICE network versus the Interlink network versus all those logos are on the machine, right? But do you really consciously say, "Oh, okay, this is a better transaction because it's processed through this instead of through that"?
Now, see, if I were in your business, that would kind of scare me because I would worry about being relegated to a commodity.
Well, I think that when you think about the actual transaction, in other words, the way that an authorization message gets from a consumer's bank account through some sort of clearinghouse and then ultimately gets settled with the merchant, that back end, if you will, is a process that is not a consumer process, it's a business process. So I don't think the networks will be commoditized for the business side of life. But I can see my 15-year-old daughter right now, and I don't know that she's going to really, when she's 40 or 45, really care, let alone the people who are being born today. I don't know that they're going to be as thoughtful about how they're paying as much as they just paid.
Right.
And so the challenge for companies like mine is to say, well, what services are we providing and what relationship do we have? What part of the tree do we own? Do we want to own the roots, the trunk, the leaves, the fruit? What part of that tree do we want to own? And what part of that tree will always be relevant now or 30 years from now? And in our worldview, the relevant part of that tree is the roots and the trunk. Fruits are seasonal and will come and go, but the roots and the tree, which means that's why we're a bank. And that's why we want to safely hold people's money. And that's why we want to make sure that we have the right features and services and are integrated with all the right services, because people will always know their bank. I don't care if you're now or 100 years from now. You may not know whether or not you used this network or whether or not your ATM transaction was processed by that network. But everybody knows what bank they work with and deal with. Everybody knows what bank they have their money in. I've never met a consumer and I say, "Well, what do you have?" "I have a checking account." "Oh, what bank do you have that checking account with?" "Oh, I don't know." Right? You don't. They always know that. Yeah. They may not know the brand of the card. They may not know who made the POS device, at the store, but they always know who they bank with. And so at Green Dot, we always want to make sure that our customers know they're banking with Green Dot Bank, that we have no penalty fees or overdraft fees of any kind ever, that their money is safe and protected if your card is lost or stolen or you have a dispute, and that you can benefit from a really good bank and enjoy that experience because the fruits will come and go with the seasons, but the roots in the trunk will be there for the long term. And so you're right. It's scary if you're already a huge bank, but we view it as an opportunity if you're not a huge bank, much in the same way that Ted Turner, going back 30 years ago, realized that as cable became more popular, that content was king, not the tower, not the transmitter. And that was his whole philosophy behind building the Turner media empire, of course. And I think he was right. And so we're the same way. We're in my view, we realize at Green Dot that content is king. And the content, in our analogy, is holding your money, making sure that your money is safe, having the right fee structure, being accepted everywhere you want to go and everywhere you need to be, and for your products, and knowing that you have good service and good pricing and fair pricing to back it up. And that's sort of the content. And so I think for younger companies like us who don't have the same infrastructural burden of huge banks with 80 or 90-year-old infrastructures, that it is an opportunity to build a name with the millennials and with the new crowd who is interested more in the content than they are the channel.
Right.
I don't know if that made any sense at all.
No, it made perfect sense, and I appreciate that perspective. Okay. Well, one last question. I promise this is my last question. A lot of folks will email me and ask me if prepaid debit cards will help you build credit. And of course, the answer is no, and I tell them that, and I try to explain why. My question, though, is do you ever see that changing, or is it just not possible?
Well, let me think how to best answer that for your listeners. The answer is that a prepaid card in and of itself does not extend credit or grant credit, so it can't build credit. All it is, all a prepaid card is doing, that's the product I invented 15 years ago, right? All it's doing is taking your cash and digitizing it so it can be used in the form of a MasterCard or Visa or something else, American Express, and then spent in the way the consumer wants to spend it through all channels of commerce. So you're not really extending credit, so there's no way to build legitimately somebody's credit score. But, so you're right when you tell your listeners that no, it doesn't build your credit. You're right to answer it that way. If you're saying, can it one day build your credit? The answer is only being granted credit and having the consumer responsibly pay the bank back or the grantor of the credit back. That's the only way to build credit. So then you say, well, are there other kinds of products and services that a bank like Green Dot can offer that can give that customer the opportunity to take out a safe loan, meaning one that can afford to pay back, that doesn't get them into trouble at a fair rate and so forth? And if they pay that loan back responsibly, can we report that responsible payment to the credit bureaus? And then over time, if they handle their other obligations appropriately as well, they can build a better credit score. And the answer is yes. And Green Dot has mentioned publicly in one of my earnings calls, I forget which one, but maybe a few quarters ago, that we have the goal to issue safe lines of credit for our consumer base, which again is a big part of America. So that low and moderate income Americans can in fact, or young people who are new to banking, can in fact over time build a better credit score and have the opportunity to take out loans and buy cars and buy homes and all the things that you and I probably enjoyed over the years. And so we do plan on doing that, but that's different from the actual prepaid card itself, which is simply a deposit holder.
And you see prepaid companies going into the secured credit cards, or you just don't see it going that way?
Well, we will. I mean, our goal, pending regulatory approval by the Federal Reserve, is to do just that.
Okay.
We think secured credit cards are great if priced right. In other words, you can't have garbage fees and things that have plagued those products maybe in the past.
Right.
But if you have a safely priced, responsibly priced product that in effect is minimal risk for the bank, so it doesn't cost the bank a lot of money to issue, but a good, safe entry point for that young consumer or that consumer who has been in trouble with credit in the past, we think it's a wonderful idea and a really good product that's good for the customer, good for the bank, and can allow that customer to self-graduate into better kinds of credit products. So in our case, we've specifically talked about secured credit and a product we'd like to do. As a bank, it does require regulatory approval. And so, there's nothing certain there, and we're always patient and thoughtful of that. But if we're able to get approval, we would love to roll out a product like that. We think it could be a logical fit for our customer base.
All right. Well, great. Well, listen, Steve, appreciate your time. Very informative and very grateful.
My pleasure, Rob, and we have a great show, and again, really flattered to be invited on it. So thanks to you for having me on the show, and have a great day.
Well, again, a big thank you to Steve and Green Dot for taking the time to talk with us. And, it's kind of fascinating to me. You think of Green Dot, it's a large publicly traded company, and it was just 15 years ago it started, in his home. And I just love stories like that. But to our main topic today, protecting yourself from fraud and from online theft. Hopefully, this interview gave you some insight into some of the protections that are available to you, some tips on how to avoid the theft or fraud in the first place. A lot of it comes down to common sense, but sometimes when you're not on guard, it's easy to get fooled by an email that comes in that for just a split second you think is legitimate, or maybe a phone call. You've had a long day and a phone call comes in and it just sounds legitimate. So it's one of those things where we just got to constantly be on guard. I wish it weren't the case. I wish there weren't folks out there trying to steal our money. But unfortunately, there are. That's just the reality. So hopefully today's interview with Steve helped you out. As always, if you have any questions about today's show or any topics you want me to cover in the future, would love to hear from you. You can reach me one of two ways. Shoot me an email, dr@DoughRoller.net. I read every single email. And or you can leave me a voicemail message. Just go to DoughRoller.net/voicemail. You can record a message to me with a question or topic you'd like me to cover. As I've mentioned in the past, you get a chance to listen to your message. If you like it, you can send it to me. If you don't, you can re-record. So again, that's DoughRoller.net/voicemail. Hey, until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.